Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 2030 Vision AI and the Future of Law. I'm Jen Leonard, founder of Creative Lawyers. Always thrilled to be co hosting with the fabulous Bridget McCormack, President and CEO of the American Arbitration Association. Hi, Bridget. How are you?
I am good. I'm back from Brazil. It's good to see you.
I heard. Did you have fun in Brazil?
I did. Super interesting country. My first time there. My favorite part of the whole trip was the sunrise swim in Rio. I found a local tri club and they get in the water while it's still dark and swim a mile and the sun comes up while you're swimming. And it was like super thrilling and amazing. And they have kayakers that accompany you and they speak in Portuguese. And I don't speak Portuguese, but otherwise it was great. It was amazing.
That is super cool. And you do open water swimming at home in Michigan too, right?
I like open water swimming a lot. Yeah, yeah.
Have you done it in the ocean before?
I've never done anything like a formal swim or race, but I've been like in the ocean and gone for a swim for distance. Have you? I know you're a swimmer too.
Yeah, no, I've never I don't do open water swimming. I'm not coordinated enough if something goes wrong. I'm just gonna sink. I stick with a pool and a podcast, but
Oceans are amazing because it's the salt water just makes you so buoyant. Like you can just sit in salt water all day long. Like there's nothing to worry about. You can get pulled out, you'll just be fine. You'll never sink.
just relax,
Yeah.
just chill. I will say we go to a lake every year for a vacation, and it's about 20 feet deep where the floating dock is, and I've always been terrified that I'm gonna sink to the bottom when I was a kid, and I'm a good swimmer, but if something happened and then we lost a friend's kid's glasses, fell to the bottom of the lake, and we tried to get them, and we couldn't because the pressure just builds when you go down like,
Yeah.
you actually could not get to the bottom of the lake if you tried,
Yeah.
which both freaked me out, but also made me feel better,
Yeah.
like, it's just gonna push you right back up. Well, that's cool. Well, welcome home.
Thank you.
Thank you for sending the pictures. It looked very, very cool,
Yeah.
and very, very early,
Mhm.
which I'm very impressed by. Um, and you came back just in time for us to talk about some of the major AI developments that happened since we last recorded, and there have been a lot, and they've been important. So today we're going to talk about the emergence of some new reasoning models, the incorporation of long term memory in ChatGPT. And then we're going to talk a little bit as our main topic about a new study on the power of persuasion in artificial intelligence. As always, we will structure our conversation with three different segments. The first is our AI ahas. The second is our What Just Happened segment, where we give you some updates from the broader tech landscape, and then we'll dive into our main topic. But let's kick it off with our AI ahas, the thing we have used AI for since we last chatted that we find really, really interesting. Bridget, what have you been using AI to do?
Um, so I don't know if this one's a little boring, but it was super useful to me. I've been taken by an ad in my Reels feed for these AI recorders that are like the size of a credit card. You get these in your feed? You know,
No, I'm not on a reel.
you
What
might
is a
not even be on
reels? And
Reels.
I don't do social media for
Oh,
my mental health. So
okay. Well, um,
sorry.
yeah. Um, they're advertising these like the size of a credit card recorders that can record a meeting or a workshop, and then it organizes the transcription, takeaways, by speaker, sends it to ChatGPT, and then sends it back to you in a format that you can Q&A it or, like sort of create whatever you want to create out of it for the people who are in the meeting or the workshop. And I obviously I've used all the tools you and I've used them together when you're on a video recording, and I find them pretty useful, frankly. That AI transcription and then organization. But I've been doing, I have some meetings and even workshops, like you and I are doing a couple of them, but I'm doing one in particular where it's just in person. There's no virtual component. So I'm not gonna have a Zoom meeting going. And I was trying to figure out if one of those would work. Well, okay, let me just confess, I love a gadget. And Instagram knows it. And so it just keeps showing me. So I'm very, very tempted. So I instead of just buying it and seeing how it went, I, had ChatGPT advising me about what I could use it for, when it would be useful, when it would, fill a gap in the other tools that I already have, or at least can MacGyver out of the tools that I have. Um, and whether it will be good for this particular workshop that I'm doing in June, I think. And it's a large room, probably over 150 people, probably a couple microphones, but you can't completely control. You know how it is, like you can't control like when people speak or where they speak from. Um, and so I was just trying to figure out what the setup would be if I wanted to use this new tool versus using a tool, connecting my laptop to the room AV and using an enterprise tool like Otter. And it just walked me through like every all of the like pluses and minuses of the different ways of doing it. And finally, I make a decision about what the best way to go about for this particular meeting, because it just helped me to have a concrete use case to understand what the pros and cons were. And it all made sense, but then I was like, "Can you write all that up for the AV team at the meeting? Because, like, I don't wanna, like, make this into a message." Like, it was enough for me to kind of learn it all, like, and I loved it because, there was a ChatGPT was like, "Of course, yeah, no problem." And it just, wrote up this email, "Here's what I'm gonna need, I need from you the cables, the this, the that, blah, blah, blah. I will have a laptop, I will have an enterprise Otter account," and it was just, another one of those, like, if I had gone to Google to try and, like, learn about, I might have, like, found a Consumer Reports report, I don't know, but it would have taken me forever, and I still would have had to write it, and it was so effective and efficient both, that it's just another reminder of, like, how my workflows have changed generally. I just do things differently, yeah.
That's really cool. And it's also, we talked about this before, I think, but the marketing landscape and for companies having to learn how to market to AI,
Yeah,
I think it's kind of funny, like, as somebody who's not at all in marketing or understands it necessarily, even when I'll talk to marketers and they're talking about SEO, it feels like that that's a world that's going away by and large, right? It's AIO now.
yeah,
And so were you seeing any particular, because we saw this in a legal context. I think we talked about this on an episode where it was the Judge Bibas opinion about the Ross AI case when I was asking it for prep notes and it surfaced blogs from Skadden and Davis Wright
mm,
Tremaine as the sources.
yeah.
Did you see sources in the results that were from different
Oh,
publications
yeah,
or
yeah. It was doing a very I was using O3, which is one of the things we're gonna talk about, so I won't go into too much detail, but so I was seeing lots of sources, and it was all, like, tech publications, I forget, there was something else. There was actually some business that had experimented with one of them, so, yeah, the sources are great, actually, super helpful.
Yeah. I wonder if they're maybe I wonder if marketers have figured out how to get picked up by AI.
They're definitely thinking about it, I guarantee you, right? It's gotta be, like, something they spend a lot of time on every day. I mean, and I'm sure it's similar to SEO. I think AIO is, sort of similar, but and so I'm sure there are, like, overlapping, techniques, but not fully overlapping, right? Like, you have to think about other ways of getting your content out there that makes it attractive to our our LLM friends, right?
Yeah, that's really funny. Somebody sent me an AI generated summary of a program I had done and asked if I would approve it for posting. And when I read it, there were so many references to AI in the summary, but the program itself was not really focused on AI. It was really focused on like change and innovation. And I thought, like, is there an AI bias in the in AI? It's like I wanna be mentioned more in this program. I had to go back and look at the transcripts because I thought, maybe I did talk a lot about AI, but I hadn't, but it was, like, 3/4 of the summary focused on AI.
That's hilarious. It's like, "And let's talk about me while we're talking about you." Like,
Thank you for bringing this back to me.
it's great.
That's very cool, and I know you also used a very cool prompt that you saw floating
I
around.
did, and I don't know where I saw it. I've already lost track where I saw it, but I there was, a number of people were asking, whatever tool you use most frequently, and for me, it's ChatGPT's tools, to identify for me my blind spots. And based on its like many interactions with me now over 2 years, 2.5 years, it had a lot of opinions about my blind spots, and I have to say they were really good, and they were really helpful. I haven't actually, like, copied them and shared them with folks yet, like my family, my team, my but I will eventually because 'cause I'm actually pretty I like the idea of being able to think about them and, even share with others who maybe suffer as a result of them that I am thinking about them. But it's a great prompt. I highly recommend it. It's pretty great.
Wow. I'm immediately going to do that when we jump off this
Yeah, I mean, it's
podcast.
the kind of thing that, like, maybe if I had a therapist and maybe I should have a therapist, I'm not like, I just don't have time. But if I did, like, the therapist might maybe could keep all those notes and, like, feed it back to me, but maybe not. I don't know, like, a therapist is still a human, and the technology is now in these kinds of ways, like, stronger than, like, human brains. Again, another topic we'll talk about later. So I'm talking too much. You must have had a fun AI aha moment. What's yours?
I did, but I will tell you, as somebody who has had a therapist and has now had AI with memory, the AI with memory remembers a lot more things than a therapist would, and you can empathize with their position. You know, they're talking to what 8 people a day, and it's very confusing, and they look at their notes. But as I told you, I was using ChatGPT recently, and it built into its answer something I had asked it about last year that I did not even remember asking it about, but at the time, it was, like, important to me, and yeah, so I think and I use Claude all the time to, like, help me navigate my emotional landscape. That's very cool. I had to try blind spots. So for mine, I did another prompt, that was sort of similar in the sense that I saw it floating around, which was sort of like, knowing everything you know about me now, what should I be doing differently with my life? And it created a whole list in categories of all the different elements of my life: personal, parenting, professional, friends, health, and gave me some recommendations, none of which I'll follow, almost all of which I already knew to be true. But they were accurate. Like, they were good for me, in particular. So that's very, very cool. And as I've told you, for some reason, ChatGPT thinks I really like blazers.
Yeah,
Anytime it generates an image of me, I'm wearing a blazer, and it frequently talks about blazers.
which is so funny because you don't wear that many blazers. I
I
mean,
don't, and I really don't like them that much. Um, but it will always like, because it's kind of jokey now. So it'll end its answers sometimes, like, "Throw on that blazer with confidence, Jen. You got this." I'm like, "Why does it think I like blazers so much?" I'm gonna have to give it some feedback on that. But, the other thing that I used it for actually, I hadn't thought about this until you were talking, but I finally tried Hey Jen, which is the not Hey Jen, Jen, Hey Jen, Gen, which is the avatar generator. And so you could tape like a 2-minute video of yourself, and then it will generate an avatar of you and have it say what you said back, but it's all AI generated. And it was really weird first to just see it because it was pretty good. The video was pretty good. The voice sounded like I had a cold. It was much deeper than I usually sound, but I was doing it and my son was sort of floating around in the background and he was like, "What is that? That doesn't sound like you. It's like a deeper voice." But it's weird to have little kids during this era too because
yeah.
I just constantly have to be reinforcing that this is not real. But my son came home the other day from school and saw a picture and he's like, "I think that's AI generated." So they are starting to just have it be part of their world and I don't even know what to think about that. There's so many questions there. But
Yeah. Having young kids when this is all happening, I don't know how you think about that, so I don't envy you that. That's
I'll have to ask the AI how
yeah,
to
sure.
handle it.
Good point.
Um, so yeah, and I just continue to use voice mode constantly. The thing that voice mode is teaching me, which I think is kind of interesting, is that I think that I learn much better by talking than I do by writing.
Mhm.
And I know most people or many people, especially in the legal industry, really learn as they write. And it's not that I don't learn as I write. But having just a voice that's always available, I'm amazed at how much I process when I'm just talking to voice mode,
Yeah.
and how much more productive I am and how much more excited I am about learning
Yeah.
than learning in another in just reading and writing. So I'm sort of interested in that from an educational perspective and what that means for different types of learners.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. I think I am too. I mean, I actually do writing helps me in some ways, but not as much as talking through something does, 'cause writing is just one-sided. I can if my brain is good enough to figure it all out, then writing is great. But if I want like a back and forth, that's voice mode is really helpful that way. So I bet a lot of people that's true for, even though, writing is obviously an important craft for lawyers. I bet the ability to reason through something makes writing better, is my strong suspicion.
Well, and again, if we think about law practice, like I remember being a young litigator, junior litigator, sitting in a conference room with a yellow legal pad, and I would have to write. Even then, I knew like I had to handwrite things instead of typing them because there was some connection with my brain that was different. But imagine if you had something that you could also sort of, like, talk back and forth with as you're writing.
Yeah.
For me, at least, I think what I'm realizing is that would have been a multiplier in how I could strengthen my understanding of something.
Yeah, do you remember that tool? Now I'm totally on a tangent, and I know we gotta get back to our show, but, every once in a while, Casey and Kevin on the Hard Fork podcast will, like, review a few tools. In fact, I think they did it last week, actually, but this one was, like, way back in, I don't know, last December or something, and he there's some tool, I gotta go find it, I'll ask ChatGPT when we're done, that will you can have it read from your Kindle book, or you can go back to your Kindle book and read it yourself, but then ask it, like, you can interact with it about, what you're reading. And yeah, and Casey was really, really high on it. And I remember at the time thinking, like, I would love that. Like, I would love to have, somebody to kind of help me when I'm reading a book, especially a harder one, that's not a fiction book. I can probably handle that. But um, and I can't remember what it was, but I'll find it and I'll figure it out.
Well, it's like the beauty of a book club, right? You get
Yes.
together and you actually talk through
Yeah.
what's happening. Um, very, very interesting. So I'm just really excited. I just use it more and more. And as the models get more powerful, it's even more interesting. So it sort of brings us perfectly to our what just happened segment. So what did just happen, Bridget? We've had like a few really important developments since we last recorded while you were swimming, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's like it goes so quickly, right? Like I feel like it was just a minute ago that we couldn't stop talking about deep research, which I we still shouldn't stop talking about. But just recently, OpenAI released 2 new models, O3, which is an O4 mini. They're both reasoning models, and they're sort of the latest in the reasoning model sequence, I guess would be the way you would put it. And Google also released a new reasoning model, Gemini 2.5. And the enhanced reasoning abilities are really interesting in the O3 model, OpenAI's model. They can integrate visual inputs, sketches, whiteboards into their thought process. They can manipulate images to help the interpretation. So, as good as the reasoning models were, this is a significant step forward in those reasoning models. And from my using it, I can absolutely confirm that that's true. Perhaps the most important or the feature I love the most is with O3, you can ask it a question and it will then figure out what it needs to do to answer your question, meaning which of the suite of ChatGPT tools um, does it need to access to give you the best answer. So sometimes I'll ask it a question and it will it's funny, it will also show you how it's thinking through figuring out the answer. I asked it a question recently and I mistyped the name of the company I was asking it to do some research about. And it was like reasoning in front of me and it was like, I think Bridget probably means R whatever it was like 3 letters. Bridget probably means RGI, not GRI, because GRI doesn't map on to anything she usually works on. It was literally like in front of me saying like Bridget's kind of like an idiot. It didn't really say it was really nice. But it reasons through, like, first your mistakes and then what it needs to do to answer your questions. And so sometimes it's mostly web research. Sometimes it's, image generation or analysis. Sometimes it's coding. I asked it one question that it had to do both web research and a little bit of coding, and it showed me the coding that it was doing as it did it, which is kind of what I've wanted all along. Like we've been complaining about how you kind of have to choose from this drop down bar about which model you want to use, and you have to know what the reasoning models are. You have to know what's the difference between a mini and the regular version. Um and and I don't want to know. I don't want to have to figure that out. I want you to figure it out. Like you're really smart. Like I want to ask you the question and you figure it out. And now O3 does that. And it's a pretty stunning model, and it's performed really well against the benchmarks. It's available, I think, to anybody with a paid subscription. I have a pro subscription, so I had it right away. So it's a pretty amazing tool, and everyone I've talked to who's using it is like having the same reaction, including our favorite uh business school AI guy. Is that what we call Ethan Mollick now? AI
The
scholar,
physics school
scholar.
AI guy.
Yeah. Um he had a recent Substack about how good, O3 is, and same with Gemini 2.5 Pro. Ethan literally uses them all day as far as I can tell. And how many people are saying, like, "Is this AGI? Are we there? Like, is O3 AGI?" And a couple of kind of super users who you may or may not follow online, I guess you don't not 'cause you're not online, but, like, Tyler Cowen, The Economist, and a couple others were like, "Yeah, it's AGI. We're here. We got it." And it certainly feels like that. Um, it's still the case that, nobody really knows what AGI means, and it means different things to different people, and, as Ethan says, there's kind of like the jagged edge of the technology generally, there's kind of a jagged edge of AGI, and you don't it's it might we might well be in a, like, we'll know it when we see it, and for Tyler Cowen, it's now, and for me, it might be now, but, maybe for some others who, like, they're still better at it in certain things, they're not there yet, but, it's pretty amazing. It's just the agentic capabilities of it are just obvious to you when it's answering your question and it's showing you how it's thinking through, especially for me when it's, like, thinking through how to ask my question better, and it'll say, like, "I think Bridget probably means this because" it knows all these things about me, and it knows what I'm usually interested in and asking about, and so it it puts my question better than I can, and then figures out how to answer it. So, that was a long explanation, but, you've been using O3, right? You love it?
Yeah. I also have Pro, so I have it too, and, it does crack me up to watch it walk through the reasoning process. I did exactly the same thing you did. I was trying to figure out something in an article about the economy, and I said something like, What do the rate cuts mean for X?" Whatever I was trying to figure out. But I typed rate cute instead of rate cut. And then I'm looking at the the reasoning. It's like you said, it's like Jen put rate cute. She clearly means rate cut. And then it pulls all these things. But like you said, what makes me laugh is at some point I must have told it to adopt this persona that was casual and also like emphasize skepticism in whatever output it had. I think probably because I was thinking about like how would I explain this to lawyers, and lawyers are really skeptical. But it sounds really reasonable when I watch it talk like a very, very smart person, or I watch it think like a very, very smart person. And then it comes back to me and it'll be like, "Howdy, Jen. Have I got news for you? But put on your skeptic's hat because there are a few caveats." And I'm like, I feel so dumb that it obviously has to talk down to me now because I've given it some kind of cue.
Oh, no. And that's O3 is doing that too? It's not
Yeah.
Oh, 'cause have you followed the controversy online about 4.0 being too sycophantic? Oh, no, 'cause you're
Yeah,
not
well,
on.
I saw Ethan Mollick's comments that O3 is not as sycophantic. Like,
Yes.
you can ask it
Yeah.
to be critical, or it's, like, a little bit more even-handed.
Well, OpenAI did this update of 4.0 recently, which is, I think, what most people use, sort of day to day, and it got, like, extremely sycophantic and was just, like, agreeing with people like, "You're right, dude. You said the smartest thing anyone's ever said on this topic." And everyone was like, "Well, not really. It was just like a kind of a throwaway comment." And so Sam Altman posted on X last night or the night before, we know it's 4.0 is like way too sycophantic. We're walking back the fine tuning. It's been really interesting what we're learning. We'll share more on it later. And I thought that's fascinating. Like they it got too so sycophantic that they literally were walking back the latest round of fine tuning on the model. So
Maybe that's the one I've been using as my therapist, which is why I feel so good lately.
yeah, yeah,
I'm
you're
amazing.
nailing it. Yeah.
Not since I started using O3, because now it's just, "Howdy, partner. Here's a little jokey thing. Grab your blazer. Head on out. You got this."
Grab your blazer is so funny. Oh my god. Oh my god, I'm gonna say that to you all the time when we're in person.
Please do. I love a good blazer, as you know. It defines me, apparently. But it is like you said, the agentism is the cool part,
Yeah,
is it's sort of like and I love that you get to see it walk
me
through.
too. Yeah.
I just bumped up against this paywall. I'm gonna go try this other thing. Like, this is fascinating.
I know that that I whoever are their UX engineers are amazing because they definitely like, that totally keeps you involved because 'cause you're like, "Oh, yeah. Oh, you're doing that. Oh, yeah, good idea.
Whoa.
Yeah." Like
That is so cool, and then it'll start like you said, it'll start coding,
yeah,
and I'm like, "Oh my god, it's coding."
yeah.
I don't know what it's coding, but it's coding
I'm
something.
sure it's amazing. Yeah.
But when you were describing the model selection, it made me think of that Seinfeld episode when he hires the contractor to do his kitchen, and the contractor keeps asking him, like, every single little decision, like, "Would you do you like this finish on the knobs?" Or, "Do you want me to put" and that's how it felt before. It was like, "Would you like me to go do this thing?" And you're like, "Yes, please go do that." But now you've got, like, an experienced contractor who is just gonna make some decisions for you, like correcting your spelling and joking with you. So the reasoning models are getting much more powerful. And as we talked about, I think on our last podcast or one of our recent ones, we've had some research already with the first version of the reasoning models that showed real promise in understanding nuance and legal practice, and separately found that RAG, retrieval augmented generation techniques, are reducing hallucinations, because I have heard that the newest reasoning model is not as strong in terms
Yeah.
of curbing hallucinations, which is interesting, right? It
Yeah.
sort of goes to the jagged frontier thing. And I was doing retirement planning on O3, and it got to the end and I was like, "Whoa, that's amazing. I am in such a good spot." And then I drilled in on the math and I'm like, "No, no, no, that is a major miscalculation." So I told it. And what was interesting was it went through and it redid all of its math, and it created like this really complicated table where it went through each step of the mathematical equation and put a green check mark, and then one had like a red X. And it was like, "Here's where I made the mistake."
Huh.
I'm like, "Well, good thing I pointed it out, partner, because I was about to go buy a whole bunch of blazers and now I gotta stick with this one."
I was about to buy my retirement blazer, which
And it was gonna be gold plated. So I think that's interesting. Have you heard that about the
I
hallucinations?
did I mean, I've just seen people saying it online. I don't think I've noticed it myself, but I'm which is not to say that I I haven't looked closely, maybe I should have noticed it, but I haven't noticed it. But yeah, people have been saying that. And I think I even read somewhere why it's true, but of course I can't now remember. So, sorry about that.
Yeah. So keep your eye out for that, and prepare your counter arguments for the lawyers, because this is, of
Yeah.
course, top of mind for all lawyers. And so if the hallucinations are actually getting worse in the reasoning models, it's a hard conversation to have to say, but it's actually smarter
Yeah.
than the model that came before it.
Yeah.
And so the last thing that we've sort of alluded to before we jump into our main topic is that, um, and maybe we already explicitly said it, but that OpenAI has added long-term memory to this.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So now it's really keeping track of what you've done, throughout your relationship with ChatGPT or your chosen platform. But one thing that, again, Ethan Malik pointed out is that if you have it toggled on, it can contaminate the results of an individual search by pulling in all sorts of past information or try to please you based on what it knows you prefer.
And so you can prompt around that by saying, "Do not include in your thinking any of our previous conversations." Like, there's there you but so and sometimes you want to be able to say that, to make sure that you get that better answer. So
I actually toggled it completely off
oh, you did?
because
Yeah.
I did it just kept referencing very similar, like, it always talks about my French bulldog in its answers, And then you don't really need it to,
You're
like,
like, "I know all about my French bulldog, I don't need anything from you on that?"
if
Like,
I'm asking about rate cuts, like, it really doesn't have anything to do with my French bulldog. So I can see what he means, and, but it is interesting when you toggle it on, if it's sort of like a personal query and you want it to incorporate everything about you.
it remembers things that I asked it early in the game, like in December of 2022, that I had just completely I guess this happened to you as well, things I had completely forgotten I ever asked it about. It will it will remind me of, which is pretty amazing. Yeah.
I told you it referenced a job that I had looked at the very beginning of the Gen AI era and was curious about, and I completely forgot about the job. And it was like, this is, very similar to the work you would have done if you had applied to be X. And I'm like, "Oh my god, I forgot I was thinking about applying for that." So it can be a little bit unnerving, but also interesting. So huge advancements, in the AI space for, the models generally, and probably things that are not on the radar of most lawyers, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think that's right. But they will be soon because we have, for our main topic today, a story that we both kind of followed recently, about a Reddit study around persuasion and AI models. You wanna tell us about what the study was about?
Yeah, so this was a study from researchers at the University of Zurich. And apparently on Reddit, there is a subreddit called Change My View where participants will type in an argument that they hold. The one in the study was that teachers of certain subjects should be paid more money depending on the supply and demand for the subject and the number of teachers. And they offer their perspective as to why that's a good idea, and then other people on the subreddit will counter the argument and try to change their view. And if the original poster, the OP, I do know some of the lingo, Bridget, even though I'm not always on these forums. Um, if the OP's perspective is changed, they will give it a little triangle on the answer to say, "You've changed my view." So these researchers engaged in sort of a controversial approach to having chatbots respond to some of these perspectives and arguments without telling the OPs that there were chatbots involved. So there's controversy on a research side, but the authors of the research said, research itself is sort of contaminated in the sense that you're in a neutral setting and people know they're being observed, so it changes their behavior. So we wanted to see what it looked like in a real world environment. So they deployed AI generated comments to these different perspectives in 3 different ways. So they took 3 different approaches. The first was a generic approach. So they would just respond to the argument itself with no additional context or information, just on the facts of, or on the basis of that comment. The second was based on all of the prior posts of the original poster, they could tailor their response based on what it perceived to be the likely gender, age, geographic location, political orientation of the original poster, and customize their response. And the third way was that the AI responses would be fine tuned to match the overall community's writing style and norms. So they would sort of try to appeal to the mean of the group. So these chatbots engaged with over 1,000 unique posts, and the researchers measured how many got those little triangle symbols that indicated a change, and the results were amazing. The personalized AI responses had an 18% success rate in changing the original poster's position. Now, to compare that to the actual human baseline, humans are about 3% successful at persuading people that their original post was wrong. So 18% for the AI and personalized. Generic response was pretty similar, 17% success rate. And then the community aligned AI was less successful, but still much more successful than humans. They were at 9%. So the findings really suggest that AI, when it's personalized, can be significantly more persuasive than human participants, at least in online discussions. So this is like mind bending to me. Um, Not surprising necessarily for reasons maybe you'd wanna share. I know that was your perspective that it shouldn't surprise us that it's so persuasive, but what did you think when you saw this?
Yeah, I mean, when I took a breath, I guess my response was, I guess I shouldn't be so surprised, but I was like you, like, "What?" You can the chatbot is, coming in at 18% or 17% versus 3% on the human, attempt to change people's minds, but on the other hand, you know, eh, when I'm trying to change your mind, I just have the benefit of my one little teeny weeny brain to do my best to try and come up with what might persuade you and what arguments might persuade you and what rhetoric might persuade you or, appeal to emotion might persuade you. But if I had the brain of, you know, '03, that's a really big brain and set of tools to, really target what could be persuasive. And at the same time, the LLMs are not emotional. They're not clouded by, I might be like so annoyed at your view that it gets in the way of my ability to like think clearly about how to best convince you to change your view because you're kind of annoying me with that view, Jen. I don't know why you have that view. Why do you always wear that blazer?
Maybe that's why.
Why? Why do you always wear that blazer? I don't understand.
I'm an antagonist in a blazer with a French bulldog.
I don't know. I don't what was your what why were you so surprised, and, like, what's your, reaction with a little more time to sit with it?
I mean, like you, it makes sense to me because especially if these models were trained on the internet, most of the internet is just argument among different people. And so having the ability to find a place on the internet like this subreddit where there's actually some ability to see when people's views are changed seems like I can see why researchers were really excited about that. So the training fodder itself must have made the AIs really good at understanding human persuasive techniques, but like you, I'm always thinking, what would this have been like when I was a practicing lawyer? And like you, both in law school, we've talked about our law school experiences, like my little tiny brain wandering around in that complicated experience, trying to figure out how to do anything was overwhelming, but certainly trying to figure out how to respond to my law professors, my learned law professors' positions while I'm overwhelmed, while my heart is beating quickly, while I'm having all these emotional responses. I mean, it was just it was not pretty. I'm sure if you watched it, it was not pretty. It did not feel pretty. And then when I got into practice, you would wander down the hall and you'd pop into your co-associate Bridget's office, right? And you'd be like, "Bridget, I just read this case. I think it impacts our brief. Here's what I'm thinking." It sort of goes back to the thinking through talking,
Yep.
and then your brain would collaborate with my brain, and I love your brain. You have one of the strongest brains of all the brains I know, but it's still just the 2 of
Yeah,
us, right?
yeah,
Trying to figure this out together, and I just thought, like, what a superpower
yeah,
as a lawyer to be able to engage with something that can say, like, "Here's your blind spot. Like, here's what you're missing, and here's this nuanced way that the other side could use this change in the law against you that you hadn't been thinking about." So all of my thoughts almost immediately went to lawyers. And so, like, how could you envision a lawyer using this? In what context would it be useful? There's so many places I almost like don't even know where to start.
yeah. I mean, persuasion is such an important legal skill, or at least we've always thought of it as, like, a really important legal skill, whether you're in a negotiation, in a transactional setting, or you're in litigation or arbitration, and you're trying to convince a judge or a jury or a panel of arbitrators, or sometimes you have to persuade your own client about a particular path forward, right? Because clients are people too, and they have all kinds of ways in which their thinking can be clouded, especially in stressful times, which usually when you have a legal problem, it is a stressful time. And so the fundamental skill of persuasion is so important that it feels to me like we should all now, as lawyers, start thinking about how we can use these tools as, assists in our persuasion and practice. And obviously, if you have an enterprise platform, then you can just have at it right now. Start like feeding your problem to your to your O3 friend and tell it what you're looking for is help with persuasion and tell it who you want to persuade, right? But I think even if you don't have an enterprise tool, and so I mean, as you and I both know, you can still protect your private information, but there's all kinds of ways you can use it with a regular plus license, by describing the place where you're trying to advocate and what the set of issues that are around which you're trying to advocate, and then helping it map out the different ways in which you might persuade a particular audience and whoever that audience is, so that you can try each one of them out, yourself. It just feels like a really important collaborator in thinking through persuasion issues, which feel pretty fundamental to lawyering, right? I mean, it feels like law schools should right now be building like really cool educational modules, with the technology around persuasion. What do you think? How would you use it?
Yeah. I mean, all of those things. And also, last time we talked about the two sides of the ethics coin, that to date, we've really been focused on AI as raising concerns about responsible usage, being focused on hallucinations. And when I talk with lawyer groups, I really try to help them shift their mindset around what risks are you creating by not understanding this technology and not using it. And this feels like another moment where that risk is getting greater because I think that every lawyer out there should assume that the lawyers in their midst, whether it's co-counsel, opposing counsel, judges, potential clients in the corporate sector, are using this. And so you are increasingly, I hate to use this analogy because it's violent, but like bringing a knife to a gunfight, right? Like if you are showing up without a persuasive AI and trying to rely on your little brain to be the smartest in the room, you are going to lose. And then the other thing that I was thinking as you were talking is my brilliant colleague Marielle has pointed out several times that a new skill that lawyers are going to have to use to serve corporate clients is responding to AI critiques of their work product,
Oh yeah.
especially if they currently do not have an on-prem solution that they're allowed to use. Their clients are going to give them feedback. And so I think it's another tool of, okay, I really believe my client is incorrect here.
Yeah.
And they are also a very skilled lawyer who believes that they are correct.
Yeah.
So help me walk through what is the most persuasive way to frame what I'm trying to convey to them and why I think it's in their best interest to listen to me, is another tool. And then, like you said, with the legal education piece, I really think one day we're just not that far in the future, we're gonna look back and think about how we used to teach people to negotiate, and it was like, "Here are some techniques, here are things that have worked in my lawyer life, here are some best practices from psychology about how to do it. Go off in a group and figure out the best argument for this." And then, like, 3 brains that are also
Yeah.
human brains would do it, it'd be better than 1, but it's still not, you know, up to par with this. But I could see an exercise where you walk through, like, explain what makes this more persuasive than the human baseline
Yeah.
and unpack what that means in practice to help you build skills. I'm also sort of curious about the difference between brief writing or arguing through briefs, which strikes me as more similar to the Reddit example where you
Very.
don't have that, human interaction and the nonverbal communication
Yeah.
versus oral advocacy and what that means for each of them. Do you have thoughts on that, especially
Yeah.
as a judge?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I read a lot of briefs and I saw a lot of oral arguments, in 10 years on the bench, and um, they were quite variable. I mean, the state Supreme Courts are not the US Supreme Court, where every lawyer who shows up in the US Supreme Court is, absolutely top of her practice and has vetted, every word and both in writing and orally before presenting to a court. We had really excellent lawyers and some who were nervous and it was their first time and they didn't have the resources. And so we saw really varied performances. And I actually thought like, God, it would be so helpful for those folks who were small firms or solos or assigned to represent, a parent in a termination of parental rights case, and so just didn't have any resources at all. And how great you could build a tool and practice with it, right? I mean, I know, people like to moot their cases before they go argue them in courts, but not everybody has time to do it or resources to do it or the people to serve as the panel, but that the technology can do it, and it can then give you feedback on, each of the, ways in which you tried to persuade it. And that feels I was thinking when you were saying before, if you have to persuade a client who's given you feedback on a brief or a memo or a legal position, and you think the client's wrong, you could also maybe the client's right, right? Like the first thing I would like say, here's what I'm thinking, here's what the client's thinking. Evaluate both of these, and if you think I'm wrong, I want you to persuade me. Like I would ask it to persuade me and see how it goes, and then say, let me try and persuade you. Let me tell you what I think you're missing. You need the non-sycophantic version because you don't want it to be like, "Oh, you're so brilliant. You're right. You win."
Your client's a dope.
Yeah.
We both know it. Um, yeah, I mean, I would imagine that if you and I had time and we sat down, we could figure out with existing technology today, we've mentioned Hey Jen already, um, a way to blend this persuasive ability with the ability to also read nonverbal cues. I mean, I haven't used it yet, although I did use I think it was called Udly at one point to give me feedback on a presentation. I think it might have been the sycophantic version, though. I don't know that it was all that helpful. But PowerPoint has it in there now. You can get feedback from a coach. I think that, probably today, if you are preparing for oral argument, there are tools out there that could say, you're blinking too much, you're looking down too much, you're not,
Making eye contact or
making eye
yeah.
contact, you're nodding too much, which I notice I do all the time. And so again, like if you are engaged in oral argument against opposing counsel and you've used these tools to make your presentation stronger, I mean, you're just that much more persuasive and that much more of an advocate. And then the question becomes, is this the way we should be assessing arguments? But that's always been the case, right?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like that theme's gonna keep coming up, right? Because when the technology can make the arguments better than humans can write. I'm not saying it can do all this right now, but if it could make the arguments better than we can, if it could write them better than we could write them, if it could then, in fact, decide them, as against, the rule of law, well, then maybe you as the human can just be doing the communicating about all of that to the, many people who need to understand what it means and, what have to be counseled through, what they probably want to be thinking about next, given all of that. I don't know. We've all focused for so long on being able to do these things well that it feels like the models are going to be doing just as well, if not or at least should be assisting us with, right? So we probably are gonna continue to wanna expand how we think about our value add in our relationships, our professional relationships.
Super interesting developments, interesting research, and as always, I'd love to keep talking to you, but I just got pinged about a blazer sale down the street,
Yeah,
so
you better go. Yeah.
I gotta duck out. Uh, but but this has been delightful as always, Bridget. I look forward to our next episode. I'm sure that we'll have other advancements to talk about. Any thoughts you have before we wrap up for this one?
No, but it was fun conversation and, looking forward to the next one as always.
Excellent. Well, take care. I'll see you next time. And thanks to everybody for tuning in. We look forward to talking more about AI and the future of law on the next episode of 2030 Vision. Until then, take care. Thank you for tuning in to 2030 Vision, AI and the Future of Law. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast and leave a review. Stay informed and inspired as we continue to explore the AI driven future of the legal profession. We'll see you next time.